BizSchool is brought to you by Neon Canvas. Neon Canvas is a digital marketing boutique. You can find more about Neon Canvas at neoncanvas.com. Welcome. Here it goes. This is episode 2 of BizSchool with me, Alex Rasmussen, where I'm going to be teaching you all things business. On this episode, I'm going to pick up right where I left off in episode 1, telling my story, what led me to where I am today. And we'll wrap up that story today when I bring in my business partner in both Neon Canvas and Signature Advertising, Dr. Kyle Fagala. The cool part about this story is that I was also on the ground floor of Dr. Kyle's other business, Saddle Creek Orthodontics, which he started back in 2012 and has grown into a multi-location and multi-million-dollar operation. He runs that practice with his amazing wife, Anna, and I'm proud to call Kyle my friend, confidant, and the yin to my businessman yang. So on the show tonight, we're going to discuss my digital marketing career, how Dr. Kyle and I met, what led us to start Neon Canvas, why we decided to purchase Signature, and what the future holds for our businesses. So let's get back to it. When I left off as episode 1, I was telling you why I thought digital and online marketing is and was going to be the future of commerce. I saw this coming as far back as the early 2000s. I sold my first website in 2001. And by 2010, I was a full-time business consultant teaching companies how to leverage digital marketing. I was still in my 20s, yet I was well into my professional career, consulting business owners who were easily twice my age. But I had what they did not, which was a native relationship to technology and social media. New media, as it was called back then, and now referred to as digital marketing. The reason I was so passionate about digital marketing, compared to traditional marketing, you could easily track ROI, or return on investment. So by 2010, I was mastering how to drive traffic into a website, convert that traffic into dollars for my customers. And now I certainly was not the first one doing this, but I was learning from the best. I self-taught myself SEO with Google's Webmaster Guide, which was on the internet, still is, now it's called Guidelines, and they literally give you the book on how to rank sites on Google through search engine optimization. I knew from day one that I wanted to have my own book of clients, that I was helping achieve their marketing and sales goals, and that in return, I could have the career I knew I was destined for. The skill set that I didn't want to acquire was coding. I tried it, I was pretty good at it, but it's not something that I wanted to do. It was just dangerous enough to get myself in a little bit of trouble. And what I found was that I was not a designer. I found that the user interface was lacking, that it needed work with other professionals to bring our strengths together and create those websites that would do everything that I needed them to do. They had to rank well on Google. They had to convert. They had to look great. They had to function well. They had to load quickly and have great copy. This just wasn't a job for one person. Yet every website being built back then was built by 1 or 2 people. One guy could code, but his designs were terrible, or a designer would have a great eye, but didn't know how to code and didn't know how to convert traffic into dollars. So after working to perfect this for a couple of years, I approached the guy in my hometown who I thought was building great websites. I called him up out of the blue. I told him who I was, what I did, and I asked him if I could come help build the digital marketing division of his company. After a long interview process, and I think probably a lot of trepidation on his part, I don't want to speak for him, but I think history will bear that out, he offered me a job. It was a fair offer, and ultimately I would be rewarded for the success that I could generate and the revenue that I could bring into the company. So I started with this company in 2012, and by 2016, I was selling and managing over $2 million in annual revenue. The company had tripled in size. I had an amazing team, close to 100 clients, and my career was humming along quite nicely. One of those clients, as it so happened, was Dr. Kyle Fagala.
What's up?
Dr. Kyle Fagala, my man here, joining us. Thanks for joining us, Kyle.
What's up,
He's an
Alex?
orthodontist here in Memphis, Tennessee. And he had given me 5 or 6 other of his buddies that he graduated school with, and they were scattered throughout the country, working with me on the recommendation of Dr. Kyle. So I want to bring Dr. Kyle in, and I want to help let Kyle kind of help tell this story. He wasn't getting anything from me to refer these folks. The occasional donut run to his office, or we'd go out and see a Memphis Grizzlies game, our favorite team. But there was really nothing in it for Kyle to refer these peers to me. And we knew that ultimately this was a market that needed to be tapped. So we had the secret sauce. Everybody was asking for it. And so, you know, we knew that ultimately we could do this. We could build something together. So I want to introduce Dr. Kyle to my audience. First and foremost, Dr. Kyle is a great friend to me and many others. He's a devoted father and husband to his 4 beautiful children, an amazing wife, Anna. He's a man of great faith, an incredible businessman. He's an orthodontist. That means he's really smart, and he's got a bunch of degrees. I don't know how many, 3, 10, something like that.
Yeah, too many. Too many.
Yeah. And he's a pretty decent drummer, as a matter of fact, from
Not
what I've
not not
witnessed.
bad. In another life, I'd be a drummer somewhere.
So Kyle,
Although I
thanks
wouldn't
for
have any
being here
work to
with
do
us.
right now. Yeah. Thank you, Alex, for having me. If I had been a drummer like I'd kind of dreamed, I'd be out of work right now. There's no way to play concerts, so I guess there's no way to be an orthodontist either. But so I'll take orthodontics, I guess. Good
There
thing
you
there's
go.
digital marketing. The digital marketing doesn't stop during COVID-19, so that's
We
good.
have not stopped. We have not
Yeah.
stopped. Yeah. Here's the thing about our relationship that I want people to know is that Dr. Kyle has a set of skills in digital marketing that are not necessarily my strengths. And I've got a set of skills in digital marketing that are not necessarily his strengths. And we realized this in a consultant client relationship. We would be in these strategy sessions working on digital marketing planning. And Kyle was awesome at planning on social media and posting and controlling that whole audience and then making himself a part of the brand and leveraging that. So Kyle was amazing at that. And on my side, I had more of, analytical ROI, ideas, these things, search engine optimization knowledge, one of the first advertisers on Facebook, and I know Kyle was early into that as well. So what we figured out is that together that we were really powerful. We had some really good ideas, and I think that we were doing stuff that nobody else was doing at the time. This was back in 2012. So ultimately, we decided to create Neon Canvas together. And I want you to tell everyone, Kyle, kind of why that was. Why did you say yes?
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like when opportunity knocks, it's the combination of being prepared. And I think in many ways I was sort of prepared for that kind of an offer. Had worked on the relationship with you, but also just within the orthodontic community, had really worked on sharing high value content for free for many years. And I did that because I had been shared with. And so I started a practice from scratch in 2013, 0 patients day one. And so people had helped me inside Facebook groups. And so I helped in return and had developed a name for digital marketing, social media, things like that. And in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And so in orthodontics, I don't claim to be an expert at this sort of stuff, but in that, that peer group or that sphere of influence, somewhat of an expert for social media and digital marketing. And so it made all the sense in the world to combine with Alex, who I knew and had access to a company. We tried to actually work out something before, but then it ended up, ultimately deciding, well, let's just bootstrap this ourselves. And so it was, from a selfish perspective, it was, well, how do I get the best website that I can ever get, made and to the standard that I wanted it made to? And that was one answer. But I think the other realistic answer is just seeing the need, answering the call of the opportunity, and just knowing that it was worth taking a risk on.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing that story. And before we go too much deeper into Neon Canvas, let's talk about your
Yeah.
first business. Let's talk about Saddle Creek Orthodontics. So tell
Yeah.
me about the humble beginnings. You said 0 patients, where you're working an associate job to pay this big loan. I assume the bank had given you. Tell me how you
Yeah.
just started your own business right out of school.
Well, it doesn't get any more humble than 0 patients. And so that's what we started with. We try, as an orthodontist, you're trying to find a practice to purchase or join. I think in hindsight, it was best that I started my own for many reasons. And so I think that's God's hand in that and providence there in terms of knowing that I would have never been happy as an associate or as a junior partner. I also had in my back pocket Anna, my wife, who had worked in orthodontics for 5 or 6 years in a bunch of different roles. And so we basically started from scratch, and we handled, I handled the backside, which is the clinical side, sort of like in a restaurant. I cooked the food, she sold the food, so she was in the front. And so we did 100 starts in the first year, which was a good amount of business, really respectable start. And then we kind of went from there. But also a big part of that was just thinking digitally. And that's the only way that I knew how to think, because I had managed bands that I was in and throughout dental school, and Facebook pages the day they started, I was on there and using that to manage and promote my band. And so I used that set of skills that I had built doing that kind of hobby and applied it, in the only way that I knew how, to orthodontics and having a practice. And how else do I build a business? Well, I can't spend 15,000 on a newspaper ad that runs twice on Sunday. I'll spend it on a website, which is where I found Alex, of course, and then things went on from there.
Now, I mean, again, you had to build out a medical practice. This isn't cheap to do. So, and
Right.
you've got zero patient. I mean, this is a big risk. Talk to me about your
Right.
mindset in those days. Was there fear? Was there angst? I mean, you had to take a big gamble on yourself. We bootstrapped
Yeah.
Neon. We didn't borrow a single penny.
Right.
Tell us how much Saddle Creek cost us y'all should start.
Oh, it's a lot of money. I mean, here's the thing. I think, like, you talk to anyone who's been successful in business or in entrepreneurship, you don't really have fear. That's not your main emotion. Certainly, I'm a person that worries, but fear of success was not one that I had. I just always assumed that we would be successful, that we would find our angle, that we'd research it, that we would work harder than anyone else, that we would, find a niche, and that sort of thing. Now, looking at where we are now versus where we were then, I don't know that I expected that it would take this path per se, but I was diversified. I had an associate job that I did 2 days a week to ensure that I had some cash. I worked with Bank of America, big bank. They have practice loan solutions, and the percentage that orthodontists fail at startups is so low that they're basically like, okay, you want $500,000, here you go. So that would not be the case with other businesses. And in fact, when Neon Canvas started, I remember having a lunch with somebody about a $50,000 loan, and we got turned down. And I was really insulted because I was like, I got 500,000 to start an orthodontic practice, and I believed in the same way about both businesses, but they don't view it the same way because they know the statistics, right? So orthodontists usually succeed in it, so I wasn't really that concerned. But it's the way I am. Is I want everything to be an A plus, and I wanted to go into it with my best efforts and just push and push and push. And the beauty of a cold start is you have all the time in the world. So I was able to work on these things, like write my own website copy and stuff, like, what I mean, stuff that I could never do now.
No, and boy, did he ever write his own website copy and have a big hand in his design too. So
Well, I'm
he
sure I
spent a
wasn't
lot of
everyone's
time.
favorite at the company as that website was being built, and I don't want to know the backroom discussions about how difficult I was. I accept this about myself. I always push and push and push and push until it's as close to perfect as it can be.
Well, that perfection is why you're a great business partner for me. So please stay exactly the way you are. Now, 100 starts in the first year. Some people don't know what that means, but you say that's respectable. I believe you. At what point did you realize that, like, okay, this thing is growing a lot faster than I had anticipated?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so 100 starts, let's say the average orthodontic case is in the $5,000 range. Now it's paid over 2 years. And so you're producing then, $500,000. Maybe you're collecting, not a lot, 120,000 in that first year, perhaps something like that. Because usually it's payment plans and spread out and that sort of thing. So you're not making money for the first 2.5, 3 years as an orthodontic practice from scratch. And that's the challenge. But that kind of lined up with the amount of time that I was in my associateship. And so once those kind of lines started to converge and then pass, I knew that it was time that I could switch over and focus just on my own practice. And so I would say, like, probably 2.5 years into it was like, this is going well, and our growth, it was 100 the first year, probably like, 200 the next year. And then, we're up to now, we'll do six. I mean, with COVID now, it'll be less, I'm sure. But, we were at 600 starts last year. So, I mean, it's, we're starting our 7th year. So we've added to it at about the same clip. We've had, some strategic changes along the way that have helped with all that. We may not go into all those details, but, you're always looking for new avenues of growth. But about 2.5 years into it, I was like, this is going great. And then about 4 years into it, it was finally like profitable, where I felt like the weight of, are we ever going to make this profitable truly? That finally was lifted off my shoulders. And I stopped thinking in that kind of rice and beans mentality that you have when you're a student till you're 30 and then you're starting a practice from scratch.
Well, I don't want to go into every little,
Yeah, sure.
painstaking detail, but I do want to use this as a way for other business owners to really get some nuggets. So maybe just give me three things that, looking back, that you did right that led to that success that other people can mimic.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the first thing I would say that is most important is maintain your spending and don't live big before you can live big. I'm a huge believer in that. I think for a business to be successful, you have to control your overhead, and part of that is your lifestyle. And fortunately, I had a wife and just in myself, like I don't want for much in that way, and so it's not like we had like the big house and the Rolls Royce like the day we started a practice. I think that is key. I think the second thing is that especially if you're building from scratch, your team is ultimately the most important part of your success. And so that starts with you as a leader, and that starts with you building a culture. It also includes any number of things. I think one of those things that comes to mind immediately is you will not always make perfect hires. And so you have to be able to fire and, kind of, you know, prune the bush, as it were, as you go along, and you'll make mistakes, and sometimes you don't realize that they're mistakes until a year or two later. And sometimes it's not that it's the person that's wrong; it's just that the fit is wrong, and it might be that I'm wrong, for that person. So, I've tried to maintain good relationships with everyone who's ever worked with me. That can't always be the case, unfortunately, and I wish everyone the best. People that leave and we don't really have the best exit. Well, it's disappointing to me. I want it to feel like a family, and I want that kind of culture, but it can't always work that way. But the important thing is that you maintain that culture and you fight for it. And so if a team member is not in line with that, they might be the first year or two. Every team member to some degree has an expiration date. And so once they reach that expiration date, sort of like cheese in your refrigerator, you throw it out. And I don't want to sound rude about that, but I think that's very, very important. I think the last thing I would say is that relationships, I think this is the number one thing about business in general, is that relationships always have value. And I don't mean that you view everyone as sort of a value or a transaction. I think that's the wrong way to view it. And there's lots of books written about, people and relationships as this sort of strategy where it's not real. I mean sincerely that you really want to get to know people and have good relationships with people. And sometimes that won't produce fruit for 5 or 6 years, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that guy that, that invited me to that thing and I went to it. Well, that's coming back to be valuable. So I think there's no reason to ever burn bridges with people, even though sometimes it's inevitable. But you try to always foster good relationships with everyone that you possibly can.
Those are great nuggets. So just to rehash those nuggets, control your personal spending, hire
Yep.
a great team, and instill a great culture and build great relationships.
Yep.
Tell me, as you grew, what were some of those challenges? How did you handle that growth? Talk about, as people are scaling their business, things they need to look out for.
Yeah. So I think the one constant will always be you. And so you have to recognize as the leader that at any point in this business, people are looking to you for guidance and looking to you for direction and vision. And that's not always easy because sometimes it's, you get tired or you get distracted or whatever, but you're the one constant, okay, as your business goes along. Now, the other thing I would say is that, as your business changes, it's sort of like a sports car that starts in first gear. So starting 100 patients the first year, it may have felt like it was difficult to drive, like the first time you learn how to drive when you're 16 in like a parking lot or whatever with your parents, but it's not difficult. But as you go into second gear, that shift is very difficult. So whatever that is in your business, you go from 1 million to 2 million, whatever that is, that shift is difficult for everyone in that vehicle. And so there are some changes that have to be made. You have to adjust the way that you're driving. And then into third and into fourth and then ultimately into fifth. And I wouldn't say that we're in fifth gear yet, but you have to understand that there are times of comfort as you get up to the right speed for that gear where things feel great. Your team is the right balance. You're able to lead in a way that's really good. And then all of a sudden you're in the middle of a gear shift and it's difficult. And so you have to know that there are these phases and great team members leave and things that are totally unexpected happen. But one of those things that shouldn't happen is that you as the leader lose so much focus that people give up on you or on the vision of the business. Because I think, and that's happened. It's happened to any business leader or a leader. And so I think that's the thing you have to focus on is, look, I'm the one constant here. I've got to be my best self as much of the time as I possibly can. And then to continue, again, as those gear shifts happen, maybe you got a great second gear team member who's just not cut out for third gear. And so you have to then either move them in a different position, train them, or sometimes you have to say, you know what, I think it's time for you to get off the bus. And I know I'm speaking only in analogies here, but I think that makes sense to anyone who's gone through that process.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. That's good. Thank you for that. So let's talk. Let's shift gears. Speaking of shifting gears, and
Shifting
let's
gears,
talk
but
about one of the things you were able to really pull off that I think a lot of people try to do and fall short of, which was to become a speaker in your profession. So business people, businessmen, women, business people are constantly curious how they can expand their personal brand and be able to get onto the stage. Within 5 years, you're one of the top speakers in your industry. Tell me how that came about in such a short period of time. And then let's talk about how you've been able to leverage that.
well, I have to be honest. Some of it's luck. I mean, just be very, very honest. And not everyone has the same opportunities. And that's an ongoing conversation where now that, I have a podcast and I have the opportunity to bring people onto things, I do consider that because there's every opportunity that I had the skill set and that no one gave me the option. And so I guess what I would say is that I don't think it was just this miracle, like out of nowhere. I mean, I had developed a voice and somewhat of a following, let's say, inside Facebook groups. And orthodontics is different than business in general. I think it would start with you've got to find a niche, which for me is very obvious as an orthodontist. As a general businessman or woman, I don't know what that niche might be, but you can't just expect to be like Gary Vaynerchuk overnight or something like that. So you've got to find your niche and you've got to be very active in that community, and you have to be focused on giving good content away and helping people. And so I will always help anyone who ever contacts me, even now. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. Like, that is why I do this at its base. But speaking opportunities, when they came, I showed up. I did the absolute best that I possibly could. And I think that's a big part of it too, is a lot of people kind of halfway do it, or they don't show up every single time. You have to show up every single time. You have to be on whatever level the best speaker that they've ever heard. And if you do that enough times, it doesn't take long for people to want, to come around and ask you. The other big part of that is what I talked about earlier with relationships, is that every single person who's at that meeting, and certainly every single person who's organizing that meeting, is an opportunity to then, support you or recommend you to someone else. And so I will always be the quickest to email back, to give the most thorough information, to show up and be nice to the AV people, to have it as professionally designed as I possibly can, to do the best I can, to stay after, to help people, to do everything. I mean, I'm there for the whole thing. And so this is true of a musician, and like, the busiest working musicians, they have the same story. And I'm inspired by people like that because, the bass player that's in 15 bands, what are they? Well, they're fun to hang around. That's like one of the first things. They're nice to everyone. They're always on time, and they're consummate professionals. Okay. And maybe they look cool on stage or something. I don't have that going for me. I'm a redhead, super pale white skin. But I guess I would say to people is I see people try this stuff for like 2 months and then they kind of give up, or they just don't give it their all. And there's a whole nother side of this conversation. These are longer answers than you're expecting. I'm sorry. There's a whole other side of like, okay, well, maybe you're not getting the opportunity. Create your own channel, like create your own podcast, create your own audience. And there's a portion of this speaking stuff that only came about because of doing the Digital Orthodontist YouTube series and starting a channel and doing a podcast and doing these things. Then people kind of have to pay attention to you, right?
Yeah, they absolutely have to pay attention to you. Yeah, you're everywhere. And speaking of everywhere, we're actually putting on a big meeting tomorrow that starts tomorrow. We're pulling away from that we've been planning. So at
Yeah.
tdolive.com, people will be able to check that out depending on when this podcast goes live. So listen, let's shift gears a little bit. Obviously, I'm extremely proud of you and what you've been able to accomplish with Saddle Creek. I've watched you grow that thing from the very beginning, literally from construction to where you are today. And I'm extremely happy for the role that you've let me play in that. But I do want to shift gears back to Neon Canvas. We had joked before about starting a marketing agency, and oddly enough, the picture showed up on Facebook today of
Yeah.
the night that I think we maybe joked about it the first time. But I approached you and I said, "Hey, we're doing this. You're in." What went through your head in that moment of this idea that you were already a business owner with multiple locations, and now we want to start a whole nother business?
Yeah. Well, I don't remember exactly. I would say it was a combination of emotions. And as we alluded to earlier, we had tried to work something out that just wasn't going the way that we wanted. And in hindsight, it wouldn't have been right. But I think that was kind of the foundation of it, was like, well, that's not going to work. So let's do it this way. I think, a lot of that is that you made it a very fair offer, and an offer that was hard to refuse in terms of how we would structure this business. And I think, in hindsight, I think it was the right decision, but I think there's a lot of people, in your case, that may have been greedier with that, such that it wouldn't have compelled me to want to do it. And so it's all these things you don't know about business until later on. You're like, that was really important, and I think that was important. You're a good, you're a natural salesman, and so I'm sure you sold it in the best possible way, right? And it just also felt like a great way to justify the effort that I was putting in on all these speaking engagements and talking about social media and digital marketing. And I love giving stuff away for free, but it was like, it was a natural next step. It's like, well, if I'm going to do this for real long term, this is a nice way to be able to support it and to justify the effort. Cause I was already getting to a point of being like somewhat burnt out on that whole cycle. Because you speak, you get paid a little bit of money, but you're spending all this time away from your family and from a productive business. So it doesn't make sense on that level. So you have to do it for some reason. And this seemed like a good way to support it. And we worked together well, and I liked you. I saw your strengths and all this, and I believe that it could be successful. You know, it's a combination of things. There's no decision that's ever without risk. And I'd say lastly is probably that I had just enough going on to not feel like I was overwhelmed enough to say no to this. You know, I think today, if I was asked to do something like this, I'd say, no way, can't do it. I'm too busy, you know, but it was the right time, right place, right people.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I want you to, I think you've got a really cool view on this. And this is important for the people here and the listeners of my podcast is step out of Neon Canvas for a second and look at Neon Canvas as the service side of it. So as an orthodontist, as a business
Mhm.
owner, how is Neon built to take care of you? Because you've had a hand in building this whole thing. This agency was built to take care of a business owner that doesn't have a marketing team. Talk about that.
Yeah. So, you know, as a business that has, you know, I've got 14 team members, 15 team members, something like that. You know, I have a marketing coordinator. She's great. But let's say that there are 15 separate skill sets that Neon Canvas can provide. That's, you know, just random number. At best, a marketing coordinator that you could hire would have 6 of those skill sets. And I mean, really, like, you know, high level skill sets. You might find someone, you know, amazing person, 6 of those. They can write, they can photograph, they can do social, you know, a few other things. They're not going to be able to program, design, do SEO. I mean, there's no person on earth that does all that. And so I think the most immediate thing that Neon Canvas does is it gives you access to this wide suite of different experts. And the idea is that you're packaging them into one person in effect. It's this digital kind of avatar that's Neon Canvas that does all this work for you. And you really can't replicate that. Now, who can replicate that? Well, a Fortune 50 company that can hire 25, 30 people. Well, of course they can. I don't know that they always do it as well as we would do it, you know, but I mean, they can replicate that because they have the budget and the scale for it. No business beneath 50 to 100 employees has any ability to replicate on that scale. And I would say it's probably more like 200 to 300 employees before they even approach, like, really they should have their own marketing division. And I still don't know that's the right decision. So as an orthodontist, it's a no-brainer because I don't know any orthodontist that had that many employees. There's also, like, you know, the beauty of when you hit a certain number of, you know, amount of production, what you're paying Neon Canvas for what you get in return is a no-brainer. So I'm probably going beyond the script right now, but for me, it's like, it should be an easy decision. It's like, I have all these tasks that I would like to do that I can't possibly do myself. And my marketing coordinator, she's awesome, but she doesn't have all those skill sets and she's busy doing all these other things anyway. So it's this sort of thing that you plug in and it kind of like turbocharges your practice. And it's helpful to literally every orthodontist. Doesn't matter where they're located. It's helpful and it's going to build business.
Yeah, and orthodontists, and we have plastic surgeons and
Right.
dentists and landscapers and roofers, and I mean, really any small business, just like Kyle was talking about, between 2 and 300. And we actually own another agency that takes care of some even bigger businesses, and we'll get into that here in just a second.
Yep.
But so Neon's approaching 100 clients now. Here we are 4 years later. I mean, did you think Neon was going to grow as fast as it has?
Did you?
No, hell no. What is why has it? What is why?
Ooh. Well, you know, none of these are like simple answers. That's the thing about business. It's like you have principles that guide you, but it's always, 4 years is a short time. It's also a long time, 4 years ago seems like a long, like Grizzlies photo from 5 years ago when we talked about this, which Facebook's always listening. It'll be, putting some other photo up tomorrow because it's listening to me right now, I'm sure. But that seems like a lifetime ago. Like that does not seem like 5 years ago. Right. Um, so it's an iterative thing. I mean, it did take a little while to get going. And then it was, at each meeting you kind of get an infusion and you get then people telling other people and then they tell some other people, then it's hooked into a podcast that promotes it. And, then we're advertising on this and that. I mean, it just starts to our kind of build. I think one of the reasons why it's been successful is that you're very good at moving quick with team and hiring. And so you've made hires at the right times. And we've gone away from team members when it's needed to happen very quickly. Like for me, I think that's a slower process. And I think for some business owners, that's really the Achilles heel, is that they don't feel like they can move away from team members and move towards team members. They don't identify the ways that they get to more business or to more capacity, I guess you could say. And so some people get to a place where like, I'm happy here. And I think that's that gear thing. I think that, people get comfortable in second gear and they're like, this is pretty good. So I think our business could be a lot smaller if not for the combination of all these factors. Some of it's you, some of it's, the increased amount of work that I've done in the orthodontic space. And obviously a lot of it's the team and just having a really good team. Like the last year and a half or two has been pretty smooth sailing in terms of the team, in terms of keeping the core team on base. And the genesis of this business was not that way. We had a lot of turnover and a lot of, good people, but in the wrong, seat on the bus, I guess you could say.
Yeah, yeah. So talk about let's talk about owning and being heavily involved in more than one business, because I think a lot of
Yeah.
entrepreneurs and business people, are constantly looking for the next thing. I don't know that it's a fault as much as it's just how we are tuned. So how do you balance all that, and how do you know when to say no now?
Well, I think honestly, I'm in a season of no now. I think I've seen what it feels like to have too much going on, and you've noticed that in me. I mean, as I've gotten busier on the orthodontic side, I'm just less available. I mean, it's exhausting. I'll see 100 patients in a day. I mean, it'd be exhausting for anybody, and I'm more an introvert than an extrovert, so it's very exhausting for me. But I feel like I'm still able to provide the value to the company that I can provide that's unique. And then in moments like this, when we've got a digital meeting, like I can provide even more value, right? And so it's different. We have different roles, and I think that's okay. So I think there are businesses that you have, the one or the two or the three owners, and they all have their kind of their different roles, right? And I think we've figured that out and balanced that. I think if I was expected to be in the office, 15 hours a week, well, I couldn't do it. I'd say, well, we got to make a change. But I think the way that we've arranged it it works. And so if another business opportunity came to me right now, I would probably say no. I'm just being honest. It's just I feel like my cup is full. Like I have other hobbies that I do that kind of keep me fulfilled and happy. And that may change in a couple of years, but I'm really happy with the mix of things that I have right now. And there's a point where there's not a certain amount of money that's going to make everyone happier. Do you know what I mean? So there is that balance between money and scratching entrepreneurial itches and being able to spend time with family, and also just whatever amount of time you require to be off stage, as it were. And so I feel like I'm in that place right now. But I will also say that as you get busier, your capacity for that, it grows. And I do a lot more than I did 10 years ago. Like I have a lot more capacity for those sorts of things.
I don't know how you do it all. I mean, but speaking of that cup, in early 2019, so over a year ago, I approached you with another opportunity
Yeah.
that had fallen in my lap, our laps, for us to acquire another agency, an agency that had had a longstanding tradition in Memphis, and was doing well and had some amazing clients. But there was a lot of synergy between our two companies. A company called Signature Advertising that we now own together. Talk to me about, and this is my last question,
Yeah.
what made Signature attractive to you, and why ultimately, you decided this was an investment that we were going to take on? Because I wouldn't have done it without you, and you without me,
Yeah.
vice versa. I mean, this was
Yeah.
something we were going to do together.
Well, first thing I'll say is that regardless of what I thought in the moment, it's worked out to be a good thing. I mean, I think that was, it's interesting. You pick a business that already exists, and I'm sure there's exceptions to this, but it kind of gives you an ability to get some of the best team members from there and combine them in. So I think there's been some real synergy. I mean, with this digital meeting in particular, there's Scott who's doing the video stuff, and I mean, he's just fantastic. And so that was only because of Signature, obviously, that he was able to come and be a part of this. And our, designer right now is from that team. And there's a lot more that I don't even know that's happening that's from that team. And so that's been the after effect of it's been great. Not to mention just the business and the increased production that's added and the increased cachet, you could say. I think what was attractive is it was a different portion of the market, and we had always wanted more of the Memphis market, but it's really hard to break into that. And you got Memphis and people that have been here for their entire lives, and they're going to trust the 1 to 6 companies that either win all the silly awards, each year, or that have been here for 30 or 40 or 50 years and that have clients like FedEx and, these big, Service Master and, AutoZone and these kind of clients. And it's hard to break into that market. So it seemed like an immediate, like, membership card into the country club effectively. So that was attractive about it. And then I think the deal that you structured was sort of felt like a no lose. And I think in that way, it probably reminds me of the initial pitch for Neon Canvas. So it's one of these things where you continue to seek out opportunities, and you have this desire to want to grow and to make it better, and you never lose that. I'm the cautious one for sure, and I'm the, like, I want to get every detail right, but I've learned to trust you on that. And I remember you saying that. It's, you sort of lay it out like, well, here's what the opportunity is. Here's the worst case scenario. Here's probably what will happen. And I'm like, okay, well, let's do it. I mean, so you kind of reach a point where you sort of know. I think the other beauty about it is with the full plate, you're like, look, I'm just going to do this and you'll benefit from it. And it will help both Neon and Signature, and it'll be a good thing. So I don't know that every business partnership runs like that. And I don't know that, it necessarily means that every future decision will be treated the same way. But I think in this particular one, it was the right way to treat it and approach it. And I think it's been a good thing.
Well, I hope if anybody can get anything out of this podcast, it's that when you are looking for a business partner, you are in a business partnership, that you got to realize not everything's perfect. Not everybody's going to see eye to eye, and you may not even be the exact same person or think of things the exact same way, but there's
Yeah.
always a way to utilize your strengths to create the best situation possible. And I think that's what Colin and I have been able to do in every business decision that we approach is how do we come out of this with, the sunshine on our face.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think actually you probably don't want 2 business partners that are the same. I mean, I kind of, that's like a question I wish you could pull like 100 business owners, you got co-partners or whatever you want to say. I'd love to know, like, do personality tests. I know we're not similar in a lot of the key ways, in the same way that I'm not similar to my wife in some of the key ways. And so those are my 2 kind of, business partners in this world. And we're both very different. You and Anna are both very quick acting kind of people. And I'm like, I'm going to research it to the nth degree. And that's what orthodontists are like, right? We're all so detail oriented, and it's exhausting to someone that's more, I'm just going to get this done. So I exhaust Anna all the time. I'm sure I exhaust you all the time. And in fairness, it's exhausting to me and frustrating to me when people do something without, like, checking it 10 times. But the thing is, you do need that yin and yang to get a business to move forward quickly, but also not so quickly that it's not what it needs to be, right? And so I think if I'm challenging people that are considering going into business with people, A, you'll never know, like, how it's going to end up. I think B, you try to have as many conversations on the front end about how you want to structure this and how you want to do it. And you always say this, Alex, good paper makes good friends. I think that's a part of it. But I also think it's just regular communication and accepting that there are strengths and weaknesses to all people, which requires humility to admit. And so if both parties in the team can be humble enough to accept that the way that they do it is not the only way to do it, that it'll be okay. And there's plenty of businesses that fail because that's not there, that somebody in the group, maybe both, they're just not willing to concede on things that they think are the only way they should be done.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, I am glad that we are able to get along. I am glad to call you my friend.
Same
But
here.
before I let you go,
Yep.
I've got a little game here we like to play at BizSchool. It's called Three Things.
Okay.
And it's just going to let us know a little bit about your personality. So I'm going to give you 3 things. Okay.
Okay.
And you're going to have to choose one that you want, one that you have to discard, and one that you're going to give away. So here we go. You ready for this? 3 things.
Okay.
All right. $1 million,
Okay.
a top of the line drum set, dream drum set, anything you could have, or immortality. So you get to keep one, discard one, give one away. What are you doing?
Okay. Well, so this is challenging. Well, I think, top of the line drum kit, I would love to have. The problem is it doesn't cost more than $1 million. So that factors in, because I could just get the $1 million and buy the drum kit. Probably top of the line drum kit, 30 grand. Like, I mean, top of the line, right? So that definitely is not going to make it. I don't think I want to be immortal, and I don't want to get so, like, philosophical. And, I think religion plays in this, but I don't think immortality in terms of here is the goal. Like, I will be happy to get 75 healthy years out of this life. And then if I can make it to heaven, which I expect to. That'll be great. That's the goal. So I guess what I would say is I'll give my son, Charlie, the top of the line drum kit. I'll keep the $1 million and I'll discard immortality. Immortality scares me. I don't want
I
to. I don't
love
want to.
it. That's
You
awesome.
live
I don't
forever
know
on
how
this earth.
many people would discard immortality, but you're one of one, my friend. I don't know
Yeah,
how you do it. You own 3 companies. You're a host of a wildly popular podcast, TDO Live, heavily involved in your church and community. We can all look to you for inspiration. Tell the people where they can find you.
for sure. Let me just first say, of immortality, watch the Twilight Zone episode "Time Enough at Last," and you'll see why immortality is not a good idea. But they can find me at the Digital Orthodontist Live. It's a podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever podcasts are sold. There's also a Facebook group if you're an orthodontist. We limit to that and to that silo or that industry. So you may not be able to join. But that's the Digital Orthodontist Live on Facebook. Of course, you can follow Neon Canvas, and I'm a part of that story and that ongoing whole thing. If you're watching this early enough, or you can watch it on demand, go watch the TDO Live Meeting 2020. You'll get to hear in 10 hours from 31 different voices in orthodontics. And hey, I'm Kyle Fagala. You can find me on social medias at Memphis Braces in most places, and would love to chat and have a good time. So that is me. That is me.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
You nailed it. I kept you way longer than I wanted to. I should have known that was going to happen, but
Oh,
thank
I
you.
can talk. I can talk.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. So I want to thank Dr. Kyle Fagala, my friend, my business partner, for coming on today. Please join me on the next episode of BizSchool when I'm going to be joined by my favorite power couple, Judy and Mickey McClellan. Judy and Mickey are going to sit down with me and talk about how they have built their business with strong relationships and savvy marketing, something that Kyle and I talked about today. I promise you, you're not going to want to miss it. So please subscribe to this podcast, share it with your friends, and do me a quick favor, click on those 5 stars and help us grow this podcast. Thank you so much. This is all of the episode, and the rest is history.